Hey, this is Rob with Mongol Bees. I want to show how I do my brood chambers and the foundationless frames I use in there. They're not truly foundationless. I do put a starter strip in there. Some folks use things like popsicle sticks or wax popsicle sticks. Some use a starter strip of plastic foundation. I use a starter strip of pure beeswax, and it's small cell foundation. I think I get this from Man Lake. The reason you do that is it's really to keep the alignment there inside the hive. There's a lot of debate on small cell foundation and small cell bees, whether or not they're helpful with mites. A study recently came out that talked about saying it wasn't really instrumental. I thought it was interesting though. They took two different groups of bees and started them at the same time in regular and then small cell foundation. And it's interesting to see how the health would do on that if the bees haven't been regressed down to that size. So I'm not sure about that study. I wasn't really a big fan of exactly the way they did it, and it wasn't year over year. So it'd be interesting to see if somebody did a little bit longer term study. I'm still a big fan. I do definitely notice when I've looked at bees for 20 years, so I can actually walk up to a swarm. I've seen the queen crawl around on the outside of the swarm. You just get used to looking at the bees, and you can walk up and definitely see a difference between a swarm that's just all Italians and everything's the same, the seven banded, versus walking up to a swarm and just noticing that there are lots of different colors and they just seem to be smaller. I've actually, looked at them in my hives. Now, a lot of folks say that there's differences in all size of the bees. You can have lots of differences in the cell size, and that's true. But anyway, we'll get back to this. So the way I do it, and I'm going to tilt this down so you can't look at my ugly face while I'm actually working on this. But the way I do it is I grab a steel ruler. The ruler itself, I think, is 1.25 inches maybe wide. And then I got a high quality pizza cutter. So I made sure I get the stainless steel. It does build up a little bit of the wax here on the wheel over time. I should have cleaned it for this video, but sometimes if that wax builds up a little bit, that can be something that'll cause a little bit of a problem. It'll grab a little bit when you're doing the wax. But anyway, the reason I use the ruler is I like the width of the ruler, and the thing is, when I look down through the top of the ruler, I can actually line up the cell side, so I can make sure that I'm still cutting straight. If you cut it sideways, the bees can accommodate, but I think it does help a lot if you actually have the cells going horizontal directly across that frame. And I'll do a stack of these, so I'll keep them on the paper. So I just basically lift it off, leave the paper that comes with the wax, and that makes it pretty easy for me to just kind of snap these out. The next thing I do is I'll take this, and these are grooved top bars, and they're solid on the top. So as opposed to the type that have a slot where you drop it in. Now you can see it wants to tilt either way. And what I like to do, and there's several people out there that do this differently. So this is just my method. It works for me. It's pretty easy. I use a straw, and these are like the bendy ones. And so I'll get that L shape down at the bottom, so it allows me to get more wax, put my finger on it, and then I will just release it. And I just grab some wax in there and just let it run down the side. And usually it'll stand up by its own. I'll do like 10 like this, and I'll leave it standing up like here for one side of that wax to cool. Once it's cooled, and technically you can do these one at a time, I'll do it again. So I'll take this, I'll dip it, you can see it running down the side. And it basically fills in that trough right there. And so sometimes I'll run it back and forth to make sure it's nice and thick in there. This one's kind of important that you do it this way, at least get enough wax in there, because all of these go in my swarm traps, because it gives you more volume inside the swarm trap. I'll put in one that's a fully drawn black comb, and then the rest of this will be open volume. And so the bees feel like there's plenty there to build. So my swarm traps contain 6 of these, and then there's a little bit of space at the bottom. It's important because the swarm traps do sometimes get kind of hot, And if that wax is not firmly embedded in there with lots of extra wax, it'll actually fall off. So I've actually gone in there and I found like just little pieces of wax. But one of the benefits of having that thick bead in there is sometimes the bees will actually just build off of that, even if this isn't here. And I actually know of some guys that will fill this slot with just wax, and it'll be rounded over a little bit, and the bees will immediately start building off of that. So anyway, this is how I build my my frames, and you can see here, this is pretty straight, and the bees will just kind of build straight off of that. So that's the way I do it.